Good afternoon, and welcome to today's ceremony. Will the guests please rise for the parading of the colors? Color Guard, parade the colors. Good afternoon. On behalf of the President of the United States, welcome to the John Adams Presidential Wreath-Laying Ceremony. The Navy Reserve Center Quincy will present this wreath on President Adams' 288th birthday. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color Guard, post the colors. The guests may be seated. Thanks everyone for coming. I would like to take this time to introduce the president of the United First Parish Church, Fiona Sankey.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Governors, the staff, the congregation, members and friends of the United First Parish Church, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's ceremony to honor the life and memory of John Adams, the second President of the United States of America. I would also like to welcome the members of the platform, including Mayor Tom Koch, our keynote speaker, Dr. Marian Holscomb, Adams family descendant, Steve Robinson, and all our community partners. It is an honor for us to host you here today. Now I'd like to invite Reverend Rebecca Froome to come forward to give us an invocation.
Will you take a deep breath with me? Feeling that spirit of life and love that moves within, between, and beyond us all, across the globe and across the generations. And I invite you to lift your hearts and join me in a spirit of invocation and prayer, listening for the language of faith and conviction most meaningful to you. Eternal presence, known by many names, known in many ways. We gather this morning, this afternoon, in a stone temple, envisioned by John Adams as a public space for the worship of God as they knew it then. In our time together in this sanctuary of peace, this sanctuary of hope, may we remember our own deepest values, our own ability to keep learning and growing as a human community in this time together. May we remember and value the life, the legacy of John Adams. May we remember and value that we are part of his legacy, part of living history. May we remember and value all of the people of this community whose families have come through this space and its previous buildings across the generations. May this time together open our minds, lift our spirits, deepen our connections. May we be blessed with gratitude. May it be so. Amen.
Reverend Froome, Captain Miller, Mr. Robinson, distinguished platform guests and speakers, to our Quincy residents, our students, and those who are not from Quincy but are here today, welcome to the history, really experiencing the history of the city through the John Adams birthday celebration here in the City Presidents. It's certainly an honor and a privilege to bring the greetings of the city to this annual event. Also to acknowledge our community partners as we continue to preserve and promote the history of this great city, in particular, the history of the Adams. And I'm pleased to say we're advancing the Adams Presidential Center, which is going to be located down the street on Adams Street. And we have our first $10 million gift that's going to really allow us to ramp up and create what will be a year-round regional facility that I think will have national implications. So it's a pleasure to join with you today, and I'm looking forward to our speakers. God bless.
On behalf of the Adams Memorial Society, thank you all for coming to the wreath-laying ceremony on the occasion of the 288th birthday of President John Adams. According to John Adams, two of the greatest threats to American democracy are party politics and public debt. In John Adams' first address to Congress in 1797, he said, "The consequence arising from the continual accumulation of debts in other countries ought to admonish us to be careful to prevent their own growth in our own." He added that there are two ways to conquer and enslave a country. One is by the sword, the other is by debt. In his inaugural address in 1797, Adams wrote, "We should be unfaithful to ourselves if we should ever lose sight of the dangers to our liberties, if anything partial or extraneous should infect the purity of our free, fair, virtuous, and independent elections. If an election is to be determined by a majority of a single vote, and that can be procured by a party through artifice or corruption, the government may be the choice of a party for its own ends, not of the nation for the common good." Last week, our former governor, Mitt Romney, gave an interview to explain why he was leaving the U.S. Senate and retiring from public life. After listening to him speak, I couldn't help but think that he was describing the very conditions John Adams warned the country about in his opening remarks as president. In the interview and in his biography, Romney said, "I don't really have a home in my party. The character of our leaders makes a difference, and it shapes the character of our country. That's the party I came from, and I don't recognize that in the great majority of our party today." And that, for me, is very troubling. When he spoke from the Senate floor on the night he voted guilty to convict President Trump under the January 6 articles of impeachment, he asked, "Do we weigh our own political fortunes more heavily than we weigh the strength of our republic, the strength of our democracy, and the cause of freedom?" When he was asked why he was retiring, one of the answers he gave was, "I really do believe it's time for the next generation to step up. Look, we are crushing millennials and young people. We older people have voted for folks that will give us more and more benefits and lower taxes and put on debt to the next generation. And the next generations don't recognize what's being put on their shoulders. We, the baby boomers, will never pay off the debt. The numbers we're racking up, trillions we're racking up, we're going to be gone. So I think it's time for them to step into Washington, to see what's happening, and to start screaming about the future and their lives. As we remember John Adams today, I pray that the next generation of leaders does a better job protecting and preserving the strength of our republic and the cause of freedom than my generation has done. And I look forward to hearing the thoughts and aspirations of the student speakers that have joined us here today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Chen, and I'm honored to be here today in celebration of President John Adams. As I was writing this speech, I thought about Quincy, and when describing our city of Quincy to someone else, you may highlight its natural beauty, the delicious Dunkin' Donuts on Hancock Street, or even the educational institutions that have played a pivotal role in shaping our community. However, Quincy's rich narrative remains incomplete without delving into its profound historical significance. Our city boasts a dual distinction, not only known as the City of Presidents, but also the birthplace of the American dream. And at the core of this history is the birthplace of our second president, John Adams. While John Adams may not be directly associated with the phrase birthplace of the American dream, he undeniably played a significant role in laying the foundation upon which the American dream is built. The concept behind it underscores that in the United States, regardless of one's background, individuals have the opportunity to attain success through their own diligence, determination, and perseverance. Adams' contribution to American democracy and his unwavering commitment to principles such as liberty and equality were instrumental in shaping this unique environment. John Adams, a prominent figure in our history, was born in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1735 on an Adams family farm in Braintree, which now comprises our city of Quincy. Influenced by his father and encouraged to pursue a formal education, Adams embarked on a remarkable journey. He enrolled at Harvard University at the age of 15, and it was within the walls of this institution that he received a classical education, immersing himself in a vast array of philosophical and political ideas. During his years at Harvard, John Adams made a sentiment saying, "Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write." This statement marks one of his core beliefs, which would become intricately intertwined with the democratic government he would later contribute to. Adams firmly believed in the rule of law and checks and balances. The concept of the rule of law underscores the fundamental principle that all individuals, regardless of their status, are equal before the law. It serves as protection for individual rights, preventing arbitrary use of power, and stands as one of the foundational pillars of a democratic government. Under this was Adams' beliefs in checks and balances, which he elaborates on by saying, "The dignity and stability of government in all its branches, the morals of the people, and every blessing society depends so much upon an upright and skillful administration of justice, that the judicial power ought to be distinct from both the legislative and executive, and independent upon both, that so it may be a check upon both, and both should be checks upon that." Here, John Adams emphasizes the rule of law and checks and balances as an essential component of a democratic government by explaining the importance of the separation of power in regard to each branch keeping the other in check while also adhering to the law and acting impartially. John Adams turned his convictions into reality in 1780 following his roles in the First and Second Continental Congress, where he advocated for democratic principles. He achieved this by drafting the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a monumental document that would later serve as a blueprint for the United States Constitution, written in 1787. In reflecting on the historical significance of the Massachusetts Constitution, historian Andrew McLaughlin once described it as the single most encompassing embodiment of the American Revolution's profound significance. Adams' influence, as articulated by McLaughlin, has reached every corner of the nation, influencing legal and judicial systems, educational institutions, and protection of individual rights. The drafting of the Adams Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is an unparalleled event, symbolizing the American Revolution's importance like no other event or action. At its core, Adams' declaration of the separation of powers and the establishment of a strong executive is emphasized in Part 1, Article 29, where it states, "It is essential to the preservation of the rights of every individual, his life, liberty, property, and character, that there be an impartial interpretation of the laws and administration of justice." These principles, encapsulated in the U.S. Constitution's opening words, "We the people," highlight the enduring significance of a democratic government dedicated to upholding the rights of every individual as they continue to shape the essence of our nation. We can see this through our own systems. As a document written and shaped centuries ago, it still stands as a model for us. John Adams has shown us his belief in a government ruled not only by law, but by the people. Amidst this remarkable journey, it's essential not to overlook the pivotal role played by John Adams' wife, Abigail Adams. Abigail wasn't merely a supporter partner. She was a tireless advocate for women's rights and education. Their partnership was not only personal, but a shared commitment to the beliefs of John Adams. Both believed the key to accomplishing this democracy was education. This led John Adams to say, "The preservation of the means of knowledge among the lowest ranked is of more importance to the public than all the property of all the rich men in the country. More than money is the fact that we are educated to be a people capable of self-government." Here, Adams highlights the significance of education, going on to say that it is a necessity that we are educated people capable of self-government. And so, once again, making his beliefs known, he wrote in the Massachusetts Constitution under the Encouragement of Literature, Chapter 5, wisdom and knowledge, as well as virtue, diffused generally among the body of the people, being necessary for the preservation of their rights and liberties, and as these depend on spreading the opportunities and advantage of education in the various parts of the country. We have all seen the effect of his words. In the United States, every individual enjoys the fundamental right to access free public education. Present here today, both I and my fellow peers have directly benefited from the educational dreams and principles realized by Adams. His encouragement of education has not only urged other states to follow suit, but it has allowed us, high schoolers of these schools, to attain an education that equips us with the wisdom, knowledge, and virtue necessary for the preservation of our rights and liberties. And it allows us to participate in a democratic process actively. For instance, within the walls of our high schools, we actively participate in student councils, engaging in decision-making, organizing events, and representing our peers. Alongside this, students of high schools engage in civic projects that address community issues and learn about the Constitution and Bill of Rights, all of which serve as compelling examples of how Adams' educational vision empowers us to engage in our democratic society actively. In this way, the legacy of John Adams lives on in the education and civic engagement of today's youth, including me. No one will deny that our nation today faces some serious challenges: managing inflation, stopping drug addiction, gun violence, properly caring for our environment, and overcoming racism. These are all real concerns over which we must prevail. Back in 1776, John Adams predicted that the new nation would face its share of challenges and that no government was perfect. And so, he built a system that was adaptable, rooted in the values of wisdom, knowledge, and virtue. This very adaptability empowers our nation to address these pressing issues, to refine and amend them. And above all else, as we come together in the present to address these issues, we must remember that we are united under one nation in an astounding legacy, that of John Adams. Just as the Adams respected, understood, and created a foundation for us, let us remember their legacy as one not confined to history books, but one known and followed to ensure our democracy continues and thrives. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Bryce, and I am a junior at Quincy High School. And we are gathered here today, of course, to honor and celebrate the life and accomplishments of John Adams on his 288th birthday. As we reflect on his extraordinary life and enduring legacy, we find that his words and principles still resonate with us today, especially with the challenges that American society faces currently, particularly when it comes to the defense and the truth of our democracy. John Adams, who was born October 30th, 1735, right here in Quincy, Massachusetts, became a prolific statesman, brilliant lawyer, accomplished author, and an advocate for the fundamental ideas that would go on to define our nation and its purpose. He became a key contributor to the Declaration of Independence, the chief architect of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the first vice president, and the second vice president of the United States, as well as holding many other positions during his time in public service, during which he championed the ideas that soon became the foundation of our nation: the principles of checks and balances, separation of powers, and the protection of individual rights, which all became vital pillars to the support of our free republic. His steadfast belief in justice, the truth, and the rule of law is recognized in his commitment to the importance of an informed and engaged citizenry that can participate in government. In Adams's time, the pursuit of truth was of paramount importance, believing that one of the cornerstones of any democratic society was honesty, transparency, and accountability. In his prolific writings, he often spoke of the necessity of truth in governance. He once wrote, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever man wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence." Adams knew that a society built on falsehoods and lies would not endure long. In the present day, we are faced with a complex media landscape and an abundance of information at the hands of every individual, often leading to the challenge of separating fact from fiction. We must remain vigilant, however, in seeking out and promoting only the most accurate and truthful information, supporting responsible journalism, and valuing the pursuit of truth over any partisan agenda. Adams also believed greatly in the value of education and worked tirelessly towards this cause. It became of important understanding to him that an educated population was crucial towards the success of our new nation. Adams stated that laws for the liberal education of our youth are so extremely wise and useful that to a humane and generous mind, no expense for this purpose could be thought so extravagant. These words are echoed in the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which he drafted. The specifics of education are laid out in Chapter 5, Section 2, which notably encourages the Commonwealth to invest in education, because Adams knew that education was the foundation of any civil society. He also knew that education is the greatest equalizer in the world, and soon became our country's finest tool in fighting against waves of hate, tyranny, corruption, foreign influence, and lately, misinformation. At the heart of our great American experiment is the institution of democracy that is under constant scrutiny, facing threats from both within and without. Adams understood how fragile democracy was when he wrote, "Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide." We must heed his words as cautionary advice. While our democracy, robust and rigid, is not immune to the forces of division and polarization, of which we see too constantly in American society today, it is the collective responsibility of every individual in this room and beyond to safeguard the democratic institutions that serve as the bedrock of our great nation, and to be mindful of the threats posed by misinformation, foreign interference, and the erosion of civil trust. Just as Adams and the men of his time defended democracy with a fiery passion, we must too step forth and take the torch in doing so as well. Democracy as it stands is not solely about the structure of our government, but it is also about the character and civic virtue of its citizens. Adams believed that a democratic society relied on the moral and ethical conduct of its people, recognizing our Constitution was created for a, quote, moral and religious people, with its effectiveness depending on the principles of integrity and ethical behavior. In a time where public discourse often leads to incivility and discord, we must return to Adams's call for a virtuous citizenry. Democracy only flourishes when its participants are engaged in respectful and informed dialogue, prioritizing the common good and upholding the values of truth and justice. As I come to a close today, I want to mention one more quote from John Adams, specifically in a letter that he wrote to his dear wife, Abigail Adams. He said, "I must study politics and war so that my sons ought to have the liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics, philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting and poetry and music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. The actions of us today have been defined by the generations before us, and the actions that we take today will define the generations that come after us. It is up to each and every one of us to understand and become educated on the issues that plague our world, nation, communities, and neighborhood, so that in respectful and peaceful dialogue, we can work together to solve these problems in order to make our posterity more successful and grateful for the actions that we took today. Thank you, and may we continue to work on a more prosperous and equitable America."
Thank you, Mr. Petosa, Reverend Froome, and Mr. Westland for your invitation to the Woodward School. I am honored to be here today with Mayor Koch, members of the Adams family, President, distinguished guests, my classmates, and students from North and Quincy High School to celebrate President John Adams on his 288th birthday. For 7 Octobers now, I've celebrated President Adams' birthday at Woodward. For the past 2, I've been in attendance here at the church for the wreath laying and watched and listened to all the speakers from all 3 high schools, commemorating John and Abigail Adams' awesome legacy and incredible contributions to our country, state, and city, to their community. An undeniable truth that has been repeated every year is that John Adams believed in that the foundation of sustainable democracy relies in part on education. My education in Quincy over the past 12 years has always had some connection to the Adams legacy. Before Woodward, I went to Adams Montessori School on Adams Street. Every day I passed the Adams Mansion, Peacefield, on my way to school. When I arrived at school, there were two large portraits of John Adams and John Quincy Adams hung over the fireplace, and it definitely felt like their eyes would follow us as we walked by. Montessori schools function a little bit different than the typical school. Students are given autonomy in the practice of learning. Yes, we still learn all the regular subjects such as math, science, English, and history, but we are given agency on how we learn those subjects, whether it's through conducting our own experiments or going on specialized field trips to allow us to dig deeper into what we are studying. We made weekly and daily learning lists that taught us how to manage our time so that we could successfully complete our work at our own pace. Not only did we learn traditional subjects in arguably untraditional ways, we also learned other skills too. We had a garden where we learned how to grow herbs and vegetables. We had weekly jobs where we had to run class meetings or prepare morning snacks for our friends. All of this was an effort to teach us how to make responsible decisions that would all help us in the real world. Adams Montessori instilled the value of being an active member of a community. We learned that we all had a role to play in that community and that others relied on us doing our part. I mention all of this because I had an epiphany about John Adams when thinking about my Adams Montessori experience and the values instilled in me through my education over the past 12 years. I realized that John Adams actualized his vision of sustainable democracy, which included a governmental structure of checks and balances and the necessity for education when he drafted our state constitution, which became the model for the Constitution, or as John Adams put it in an 1814 letter referencing to himself in the third person, his system of government, which is the system of Massachusetts, as well as the system of the United States, which are the same as much as an original and a copy of the same, was calculated and framed for the express purpose of securing to all equal rights and equal laws. I realized that everything he had created was for us, posterity, right now, in this moment. John Adams knew that democracy itself did not guarantee liberty and that it could be corrupted. He wrote clearly, "The preservation of liberty depends upon the intellectual and moral character of the people. Ambition is one of the more ungovernable passions of the human heart. The love of power is insatiable and uncontrollable. The danger from all men, the only maxim of free government, ought to be to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty." And in that 1814 letter, he also explained his purpose in confronting the fragility of democracy. It was my duty to show that democracy was as unsteady, equally envious, ambitious, avaricious, vain, proud, cruel, and bloody as aristocracy or monarchy, and that an equilibrium of those different powers was indispensably necessary to guard and defend the rights, liberties, and happiness of the people against the deleterious, contagious, and pestilential effects of those passions of vanity, pride, ambition, envy, revenge, lust, and cruelty, which domineer more or less in every government that has no balance or an imperfect balance. Would John Adams be surprised at the state of our union today? No. He recognized that people would always be people and that people acting for their own interests and not the will of others would lead to what we are witnessing in government today. You are probably saying to yourself, he couldn't have imagined social media, TikTok, X or Twitter, Instagram, and you're probably right that he couldn't imagine the technology. But John Adams was no stranger to troll farms spreading dis and misinformation among the masses. Thomas Jefferson commissioned and paid for a one-man troll farm, master propagandist James Callender, to troll the heck out of John Adams during the election of 1800. In publications, Callender absurdly referred to John Adams as a, quote, repulsive pedant and gross hypocrite, and, quote, in his private life, one of the most egregious fools upon the continent, claiming the reign of John Adams has hitherto been one continued tempest of malignant passions. And we won't even get into Hamilton's trolling of President Adams. So no, neither John nor Abigail Adams would be surprised about the antics and rhetoric we are surrounded by today. However, I believe John and Abigail Adams would be surprised by our lack of action, of our apathy towards the role of citizens. John Adams wrote, "Posterity, you will never know how much it costs the current generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it." I believe John and Abigail Adams would be surprised that we are carrying around in our pockets access to all the information one needs to know to be informed citizens, to know exactly what our rights are and how to defend those rights. That we instead use this tool to scroll endlessly, to parrot the messages we want to believe are true, rather than taking the time to find the facts and form our beliefs and opinions based on those facts, not on our bias and feelings. I believe both John and Abigail Adams would think we need to be making better use of it. See, the government structure that John Adams planned for, that understood the importance of education, not just academics, but of the whole person, which would establish the values of empathy, kindness, generosity, respect, and responsibility towards others, and the safeguards he put in place so that no one person or a few people could rob us of our liberty, was just part of the plan. He meant for us, posterity, to recognize why these things are important for us, posterity, to then do what was needed as citizens to protect it. Democracy asks us to be a part of the process, a part of the solution, problem solvers, engaged citizens. We have fallen into the trap of troll farms. We are transfixed and triggered by debate online, which is not debate at all. Social media isn't human-to-human conversation. It does nothing to solve the problems that we complain about. It's random people screaming into an echo chamber trying to hear their own thoughts yell back. And it does nothing to ensure that our democratic institutions continue to exist beyond this moment. What we need to remember in this moment, what we need to do to ensure our liberty moving forward, is to recognize what an incredible gift John Adams established for us and be active members in the solutions to keep striving for that more perfect union. We, the people, have to stop full caps yelling at each other into the ether and do our part. We must go out and vote, not just for our individual interests, but for interests of one another, to preserve our freedom, to preserve our democracy, and to preserve our democratic institutions. In all the craziness and heartbreak over the past few months and over the past several years, I recognize how lucky we are to live in a country where we are still allowed to air our grievances publicly against the things that we disagree with. But we must not stop there. We must come up with solutions to the problems that we face. We must stand up and fight for all to ensure our freedoms. That means standing up for all in our community. It is my education in Quincy at Adams Montessori and Woodward, and the example that John Adams, Abigail Adams, and John Quincy set that has taught me that we all have a role to play in our community, our city, our state, our country, and that we all are relied upon to do our part because posterity, the future, is relying on us. Thank you.
As someone who uses words every day in teaching and writing and research, I'm finding it difficult to find the words to express what it means to me to be here today, in this place, with all of you, commemorating this man. My deepest thanks go to Bill Westland for the invitation, and I'm honored to be a part of this platform, especially those students. It's a tough act to follow, but more importantly, they give me hope, so thank you for that. In thinking about our theme today, John Adams and democracy, I decided it would be nice to trace the thoughts of John Adams as he observed and participated in the events that led to the birth of the United States and the government that would be adopted here. As early as 1755, when he was all of 20 years old, Adams ruminated on the idea that the seat of the English Empire might transfer to America, for the population here would soon outstrip that in England. He shared these thoughts in a letter to a friend, and even argued, the only way to keep us from setting up for ourselves is to disunite us. It is fascinating to consider that at such an early age, John Adams began to think about these issues. He was familiar with history and philosophy. Soon he would be well-versed in the law. It is not surprising that such a man would have a good deal to say about the seat of government and the role of the people. Early in the crisis with England, John Adams expressed his pride in the people of the colonies for their resistance to the Stamp Act. In a diary entry in which he was reflecting on the year 1765, he wrote, "The people have become more attentive to their liberties, more inquisitive about them, and more determined to defend them than they ever were before known or had occasion to be. Innumerable have been the monuments of wit, humor, sense, learning, spirit, patriotism, and heroism erected in the several colonies and provinces in the course of this year. Our presses have groaned, our pulpits have thundered, our legislatures have resolved, and our towns have voted." While he was still unsure about the resolution of the Stamp Act crisis, he was happy to see the spirit of the people. In later years, Adams would turn his attention to the art of governing these people. He was always concerned about the peril of mob rule. He made this clear in his defense of the British soldiers after the Boston Massacre. Therefore, when he turned his thoughts to independence, he also spent a good deal of time thinking about government and the kind of government that would be best suited for the new nation. In this way, he was different from some of his fellow revolutionaries. For example, he wrote to Abigail in March of 1776 about his impressions of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. He told her that he and others in the Continental Congress felt there is a great deal of good sense delivered in a clear, simple, concise, and nervous style. He liked Paine's take on the difficulty of reconciliation with England, but also said, "Indeed, the writer has a better hand at pulling down than building." You see, by this point, John Adams wanted to build. He realized that simply getting rid of English rule was dangerous without governments in place. He began to make his preferences known. In addition, his excitement at the prospects of creating governments that would best represent the people comes through in his writing. In April of 1776, in what came to be known as Thoughts on Government, Adams wrote to a colleague, "You and I, my dear friend, have been sent into life at a time when the greatest lawgivers of antiquity would have wished to have lived. How few of the human race have ever enjoyed an opportunity of making an election of government more than of air, soil, or climate for themselves or their children." His excitement over this prospect leaps off the page. Yet, he is clear about what should not be the foundation of a government of the people. He observed that fear is the foundation of most governments. But it is so sordid and brutal a passion that Americans will not be likely to approve of any political institution which is founded on it. Instead, he made clear that the happiness of the society is the end of government, and that the form of government which communicates ease, comfort, security, or in one word, happiness to the greatest number of persons and in the greatest degree is the best. Now, in Adams' mind, a republic was much more likely to ensure this happiness than any other form of government. While he wished to see the majority of the people happy and secure, a sentiment of democracy, when it came to government structure, he never strayed from the idea of a balanced representative republic. What has become over time what my colleagues in political science now refer to as a representative democracy. As with many other issues, John Adams could combine optimism with a realistic assessment of human nature. Again, in April of 1776, writing this time to James Warren, Adams expressed enthusiasm for the progress toward independence. Yet he also had an important warning to convey. We may please ourselves with the prospects of free and popular governments, he said, but there is great danger that those governments will not make us happy. God grant that they may. But I fear that in every assembly, members will obtain an influence by noise, not sense, by meanness, not greatness, by ignorance, not learning, by contracted hearts, not large souls. This quote has appeared more and more on Facebook lately, I've noticed. Somehow it resonates with us today. Let me focus on one thing that John Adams says here: ignorance, not learning. For John Adams, free governments and education went hand in hand. It is not surprising that in the draft of the Massachusetts State Constitution, written in 1779, Adams included a section called the encouragement of literature, etc. He stated that wisdom and knowledge were key to the preservations of our rights and liberties. It was imperative that the government of the state cherish the interests of literature and the sciences in order to diffuse knowledge to the greatest number of people. This was the key to free governments among the people, according to John Adams. Hearing these students today and seeing all of you here, I don't hesitate to say that John Adams would be pleased by the progress we've made toward an educated people living in and supporting this republic. I will close with one more line from the Thoughts on Government. John Adams said, "I hope you will avail yourself and your country of that extensive learning and industry which you possess, to assist her in the formations of the happiest government and the best character of a great people." While John Adams was writing to a contemporary, I hope that we can embrace his appeal for ourselves in the present day. He would expect nothing less. Thank you.
We will now place the wreath from the President of the United States onto the tomb of President John Adams. Please remain seated until the presentation is complete. We will return to retire the colors.
On the tomb in a moment of respect and gratitude for your life, your commitment to your legacy. Happy birthday, John Adams. May your memory be a blessing.
As a church historian, I'm supposed to say something after all these speeches, but I really can't add much to it. I think they all did a great job, don't you? So what I thought I'd do is just sort of, I have a couple of quotes that probably make a lot of sense now, that we should think a little bit about. And, you know, John Adams one time said, "The essence of a free government consists of the effective control of rivalries. I fear that in elected offices, members will now obtain influence by noise, not sense." And that's basically what you said before. And I think that was really worth repeating. And he also said, "The form of government which communicates happiness to the greatest number of persons and in the greatest degree is the best." And one last remark that we should think about a little bit. In the letter to John Taylor in 1814, this is what John Adams said: "There was never a democracy that did not commit suicide." And I think that's something we should think a little bit about. And you know, when John Adams died on the 4th of July in 1826, a John Marston was with him. And he wrote to John Quincy Adams that when his father died, there was a flash of lightning, a clap of thunder which shook the house, and a splendid rainbow arching over the horizon. And if that isn't true, it probably should be, I think. And I just want to thank everybody for being here. If you want to take, after this service, go down to the crypt, I should say, and see the wreath and so forth. We'll have a guide down there for you. Also, we have a reception here afterwards, and if you get there quickly, you might have a piece of Kandiameister's birthday cake. It won't last very long. And so, once again, I want to thank everybody, and I also want to point out that we had students here from North Quincy High School, and Woodward School for Girls. And I think that is really good. And so now I'm going to turn it over to our minister, Rebecca Froome, and she is our 24th minister here. And so therefore, she's going to do the benediction. Thank you.
Having opened our minds to the thoughts of one another, having honored the work, the commitment, the vision of John Adams, having paused to recognize our own place in living history, may we go forth committed to the promise of this democracy and the role that each of us have in that promise being realized. May we go in peace, go in love, to be a blessing to the world. Amen.
Will the guests please rise? Flag detail, prepare to retire the colors. Retire the colors.